from 18 News, your local election headquarters. This is the 23rd Congressional District Debate, live from Corning Community College.
Good evening, live from Corning Community College, and welcome to the 23rd Congressional Debate between Congressman Tom Reed and Tracy Matrano. I'm Zach Wheeler, moderator of this debate.
And I'm Brooke Taylor, a full house tonight, so thank you to everyone for joining us. Throughout the next hour, the two candidates are going to be answering a variety of questions facing both our nation and our district. And just a reminder that My Twin Tiers is streaming this live right now on our Facebook page. Feel free to head over there. We have a poll going out throughout this, and feel free to cast your vote.
And questions will be presented by myself, Brooke Taylor of WETM TV, and Sean Vargo of The Leader in Corning. But first, let us welcome the candidates to the stage. Thank you. Right now, Dr. Catherine Douglas, president of Corning Community College, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States. Let us all stand for that.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Best of luck.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. We now move to opening statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes to give an opening statement. The order was determined by a flip of the coin earlier tonight. Congressman Reed won the coin toss and will go first.
Well, thank you, Zach. Thank you to Corning Community College. And thank you, Tracy, for being here tonight to have this debate about the important issues facing our country. You know, I'm the youngest of 12. My father passed when I was 2. I was raised by a single mother. My family and I live in a house here in Corning, and my grandfather built in 1921. My mom taught me people work best when we work together. These are the values I bring to Washington, D.C., representing you each and every day. I am proud of my work co-chairing the Problem Solvers Caucus, the only bipartisan group in Washington, D.C. that's been recognized as a forum that is trying to solve the problems for the American people. And I will tell you, we have come together, 24 Democrats, 24 Republicans, on issues of health care, immigration, things like prison reform, things like even reforming our scheduled controlled substances law at the federal level. And now this group is standing firm to change the rules of the House of Representatives because that institution has become a top-down, leadership-driven organization. And it's time now to reward consensus, and we have an opportunity, and with the Problem Solvers Caucus group, we will change the rules to get it working in the House of Representatives for the American people. I'm proud of the 250-plus town halls I've done, standing in front of you, even the people that adamantly disagree with me, because I respect that voice. I stand and fight extremism every day, because at the end of the day, what works best for America is practical, common-sense American solutions, and I ask for your continued support as we got work left to do in Washington, D.C. on behalf of you.
Tracy.
Good evening. Thank you, WETM and the Corning Community College, my family, Vicki, Nico, Catherine, and Sam, friends and supporters, and especially Mayor Bill Boland of Corning, and all of you for being here tonight. I am grateful for the opportunity to introduce myself unvarnished by campaign advertisements, to win your support on November 6th. I grew up in Rochester. My father, who left high school to help support his immigrant Italian family, came home from the Second World War to open a downtown restaurant. My Irish mom was a barmaid in the tavern across the street. And I learned the meaning of family, hard work, and commitment in that restaurant. Grateful for the formal education I have since received. I think my best education came from drawing a Jenny Cream ale for the people I met there from all walks of life. As a teacher, attorney, internet policy, and cybersecurity specialist, I have a professional career of results. I entered politics out of an abiding concern for our national security and the integrity of the democratic process. And if elected, I will be the only congressperson in Congress with that specialty that we dearly need to address. And since entering politics, I've come to embrace the people of Western New York, the Southern Tier, and the Finger Lakes, where I have lived my entire life. In that time, I have listened and learned what you need and want: affordable health care, access to a meaningful education without debt, infrastructure, including the internet, responsible stewardship of our beautiful resources, and a tax policy that for working and middle-class people makes sense.
All right, thank you. Now on to the questions. A reminder of the rules. Questions will go back and forth between the candidates, 2-minute answers, then a 30-second rebuttal opportunity. Time limits will be strictly enforced. Time cues will be provided to the candidates for their benefit at the monitor in front of us, along with our timekeeper. We ask Sean Vargo to ask the first question to Tom.
All right, Congressman Reed, one word is linked to your campaign, and that word is extreme or extremism. Can you please give us your definition of extreme or extremism?
You know, I think it's represented in the contrast between my opponent and I, Sean, to be perfectly honest with you. When my opponent supports open heroin injection sites in our communities, that's extreme. When my opponent wants to embrace a government-run health care that is going to cost $32 trillion, $32 trillion, that's going to double your taxes. That is going to cause significant tax increases across the way. But also, government-run health care. You know, my opponent and I were in Jamestown not too long ago, and in that exchange of ideas, she referenced Great Britain as kind of the ideal healthcare system for us. Remember Charlie Gard, that baby, where the mother and father wanted to get that baby life-saving treatment and was told by the Great Britain government, no, your baby's going to die and you're not going to be able to get the health care you want for your child. That's not the American way. And I will tell you, when we talk about manufacturing, I think there's a contrast between my opponent and myself. I believe in U.S. manufacturing. My opponent says that there are manufacturing jobs of the 18th and 19th century. That is an extreme position. That is not the American way. I believe we have an opportunity now that we got tax reform on the books, and we're providing an opportunity for folks to bring back American manufacturing to American soil. It is happening. We see it in our backyard. I was just at the Rand Corporation the other day, where they just opened up a new facility in Faulkner, New York, in the district, to start building cutting-edge technology and manufacturing things here in America. That is the America I believe in, where we champion the American work ethic. We have government policies under our welfare programs that require work requirements because, you know what? It's about empowering people. Our work requirements are have a job, get an education, and I will tell you, that's what we're going to continue to fight for.
All right, thank you. Tracy, 30-second rebuttal.
I believe that health care, 70% of the people in this country now want to have some form of a Medicare for all or a single-payer system. Studies show that it could be about $2 trillion worth in saving. I am for education improvements, pre-K through 12, as well as correcting education to get jobs that people need when they get out of high school, and also without usurious debt. I don't think it's too extreme to want everyone to have the internet. And by the way,
We'll hold on that. All right, Brooke.
Yes, our next question for Democratic candidate Tracy Matrano. As you've been campaigning, what is the main issue that you hear about the most, and how do you plan on addressing that?
It's healthcare, healthcare, and healthcare. And I would address it, as I was just starting to speak, Brooke, by talking about a carefully implemented system that is now going by the name of Medicare for All through a single payer. I would do it in a carefully implemented way so as not to spike taxes, so as not to disrupt people's health care, and not to shock the economy. It's about 15 to 20% of our economy. There are reasons why I believe we can do this without raising taxes. There's currently no competition in the market. To put government in a position where we could negotiate on everyone's behalf would be the most important shift to occur. We could also eliminate the advertising and administrative costs that are now 1/4 to 1/3 of what you pay every time you go to a doctor. And how about those CEO executive compensation packages that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars that we could also eliminate? It really would create a more efficient system. Mr. Reed will want to call it socialism. It's not. The providers are not employees, and the drug companies are not owned by the government. But rather, it has been shown to save $2 trillion, and it also would bring health care to everyone in the United States. By the way, when I mentioned the UK, I specifically said in the recording that you could all listen to that I was not holding the UK up as an ideal system. However, I wanted to comment that they actually provide dental care for people. And when I have visited there, I don't see what I see in so many parts of this district. I spoke to a woman 2 weeks ago in Jamestown, 30-some years old. She did not have any teeth. I don't know how she gets her nutrition. I have spoken to people all over this district who could benefit from dental care that we do not provide even in our Medicare system. So to compare to other countries is not to be unpatriotic. It's patriotic.
So, please hold your applause. Please hold your applause. Tom, if you could respond. 30 seconds.
What we're talking about is government-run health care. And Tracy, your own words at Allegheny County Candidate Nights on May 10, 2018, the health care would cause our taxes to go up somewhere in the range of 20 to 25%. Those are Tracy Matrano's words. Words matter, folks. That type of tax increase will kill our health care and our country going forward. And I don't find that funny. When my opponent removes her website and changes position, I think those are politicians of yesterday that my opponent represents.
All right, thank you. And moving on to the next question, let's stay with health care. This is for Congressman Reed. When it comes to health care, you voted numerous times to overturn the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, a law that has ensured Americans with pre-existing conditions have good health care coverage. If your party was to win a majority again and had enough votes to overturn ACA, would you vote for it, or would you fight to ensure that those who have pre-existing conditions in this district have access to quality health care?
You know, my record's clear. I voted against Obamacare, and I believe that's the wrong path for the future of America. Now, when it comes to some of the reforms of the Affordable Care Act, I've supported them, Zach. Things like the lifetime caps on your insurance coverage, things like pre-existing conditions, that is ingrained in health insurance law going forward, and I support that. I'm the father of a type 1 diabetic. My son Will is in this room tonight. I think of him and all the other folks that I've come across that have that pre-existing condition, and we're going to stand firm to protect that reform in health care going forward. But let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, as they were saying under the Affordable Care Act, you could keep your doctor. I guarantee you health insurance costs are going to go down. That's not what happened. Health insurance premiums are going up. Health care costs are going up. And what we need to do is not embrace government-run health care. I get it. I get it. People are fearful and have anxiety about their health care needs going forward. But you turn it over to government, and you give government that power over your lives, $32 trillion of tax increases coming your way. Government controlling your health care decisions. I think we have a better way. I think we need to empower doctors, and we need to empower patients in the health care transactions. We need to make sure that transparency is put into our health care marketplace so that we can truly hold accountable these providers, these drug companies, and say to them, you know what, why are you charging me what you're charging me? Why are the costs going through the roof? I think we can embrace things to take on things like defensive medicine. I think we can embrace things like hospice and palliative care in America because you provide such relief and quality of life. I'm a hospice volunteer, Zach, in my private time. And I will tell you, you have a good quality of life and you are much more effective in the health care that you're providing at end of life with hospice and palliative care.
All right, just a clarification. Tracy, you'll actually have 2 minutes, and then, Congressman, you'll have 30 seconds to rebut. So go ahead, 2 minutes for that question.
Well, you asked it in a very considerate manner, Zach, because Mr. Reed has voted against affordable health care every single time in the last 8 years he has been in office that it has come across his desk. That means that we have 40,000 people still in this district without any form of health care, including almost 8,000 children, and we have a representative who in 8 years has done nothing to help and nothing about it. HMOs give Mr. Reed more money from their corporate PACs than any other source of his campaign financing. When he talks about transparency, I don't know who he expects is going to ask this question of, you better be transparent about it. It's a facetious approach. The fact of the matter is there is no competition in the market because the government has a patchwork of some programs, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, the VA, and then there are major health maintenance organizations that otherwise control this market. We pay $3.5 trillion a year in health care, which is twice the amount of the next highest developed country in the world. The costs of health care are skyrocketed, and Mr. Reed represents those interests. To also suggest that you are going to lose your provider is missing the point of what already exists. If you're not in network, you don't get to go to the provider you want. But in a government-run system which will negotiate on our behalf, you can go to anyone you want. That's part of the grace of it. Thank you.
30 seconds.
So just let's be clear, what Tracy just said is that you will not have employer-sponsored health care in America under her proposal. Employer-sponsored health care is something you earn at work, and that's the work ethic I believe in America. And what I do also believe in our health care future for America we need to do is we need to move away from a fee-for-service system completely. Right now, our system is based on the more the providers do, the more they get paid. We need to reward efficiency and quality to drive down and have the interest drive these costs down.
All right, moving on, Sean.
Asking Tracy?
Yes, Tracy.
All right. It has been reported that you have been supportive of injection sites. Could you please clarify your position on that matter?
Sure, Sean, I'd be happy to do that. This is a very good example of exaggeration, hyperbole, to such a degree that it does not resemble anything that I have ever said about injection sites. So I appreciate the opportunity to clarify it. First of all, this is not the most important issue. I think one of the reasons Mr. Reed likes to bring it up when it comes to our opioid crisis is to divert from the fact that his solution is the death penalty for drug pushers. And somehow the one bipartisan bill that we've had this year, Mr. Trump signed, Republicans, Democrats enthusiastic because we've been waiting for the federal funds to help us with this terrible opioid crisis. Mr. Reed didn't show up to vote. So now let me share where I stand on this. First of all, we have to have comprehensive health care so we could deal with some of the preventive measures. We have to have the support for this act that just went through so that we can get treatment. We have to address the legal issue of pharmaceutical companies that have peddled these drugs that are highly addictive for 3 decades now, to the tune of over 300,000 deaths, and how much heartache in families around this entire country. We have to also address the illegal drug trade, and it mystifies me how this scourge on our country for 50 years or more we have not. The injection sites I am referring to would only be if a community wanted to have them. They are voluntary, not compulsory. They would only be under law enforcement supervision, the medical community supervision and maintenance, and they would be a bridge to treatment. Is it so bad to consider ideas that ultimately are designed to help people? I don't think so. But what I think is unfortunate is in a political campaign to have someone so twist your words is that it's almost not allowed to bring up an idea just when you're trying to help. And these people need help. I don't think the death penalty, and I don't think missing a vote is going to do it.
Thank you. Moving on to Congressman Reed. Tom, if you would respond, 2 minutes.
So let's just be clear. Even as Tracy said tonight, she supports open heroin injection sites in our communities based on some conditions that she has articulated. I have been yelled at by the best of them. I will fight this extremism every day, each and every day I'm in Washington, D.C. And Tracy, I'll accept your criticism about me missing this vote. I was at my son's high school graduation that day. As my father passed away when I was 2, I am not going to miss the moments I didn't have and cause the pain and grief of missing those opportunities. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to accept this criticism, because I was at my son's local high school celebrating his graduation that my father wasn't able to, that's despicable, Tracy. That is despicable for you to try to make that claim. I care deeply about these folks who are in addiction. That's why open heroin injection sites in our communities is not the answer. That's why we do support getting resources to our law enforcement. And yes, I want to take a tough stand, the death penalty for those traffickers that are pushing fentanyl and killing our people on their first dose into our communities. That's who I'm going after. But we also need, on the heroin situation, we need awareness and prevention, not a government saying it's okay to shoot up in our communities. And what we also need is our first responders and our treatment providers to be armed with the resources to take care of our men and women and our sons and daughters and our brothers and sisters that are dealing with this horrific addiction problem. And that is what we're going to do going forward.
Tracy, 30-second response.
Pharmaceuticals is also one of Mr. Reed's largest campaign donors. I know that he does not have the okay to really talk about effective treatment for them, most of which will be engineered with the suits attorney generals as well as individual plaintiffs should be bringing, just like we did with tobacco. And it is time for them to be able to answer these questions in court.
All right. A question for Tom by Brooke.
On Saturday, 11 innocent people were killed when a gunman walked into a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and he was carrying 4 firearms, one of them an AR-15, which has caused some controversy on whether the gun should be legal here in the United States. What is your stance on this gun?
Well, first of all, I was so proud to have my co-chair in the Problem Solvers Caucus, Democrat Josh Gottheimer, join us on our weekly press call, and I believe WTM was a participant in that this week, where we took a moment of silence and expressed our joint concern for the Jewish community and the horrific tragedy that happened in Pittsburgh, and send the message we stand with that community and those people that suffered a horrific loss such as that. But I'll be clear, when it comes to the Second Amendment, I stand for the Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment. It is one of our constitutional, individually guaranteed fundamental rights that we have as American citizens. Now, does that mean that we don't want to deal with this problem? That is why what we want to do is focus on the root cause of the issue. Get to the person behind the gun. I will tell you, when I talked to the folks from Parkland, Florida, and after that horrific shooting, and you talk about Nicholas Cruz, and a lot in the media were saying, we can't use that name. We don't want to talk about Nicholas Cruz. Yes, we should. We should condemn him for that horrific act, but we should learn from him every contact that he had with law enforcement, with health providers, with his teachers. There was a moment lost in our bureaucracy in order to deal with that individual and make sure that he was not a harm to the people there. So Pittsburgh is no different. This was a crime of hatred. This was a crime against Jewish people because of their religious belief. That needs to be called out, and we should be joining together like Steve Scalise and I were talking about here recently, who suffered a horrific injury. And he did not attack the Second Amendment. What he said is what we say. Let's join hands and solve this problem like we did in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and how we can address the issue of the person behind the gun and get that taken care of once and for all.
Tracy, 2-minute response.
As I support all constitutional amendments, I support the Second Amendment. I believe it is within the Second Amendment to have federal background checks with no loopholes. And I would like, in his response, for Mr. Reed to clearly state whether he is willing to sew up all of the loopholes, such as gun show, that allow some of these kinds of weapons to be sold without any regulation whatsoever. After that, I don't believe Congress should be passing any laws restricting gun rights for responsible gun owners. Congress is a federal body. The United States is too vast. What works in Alaska might not work in downtown Manhattan or even in Cattaraugus. However, I do not believe that Congress has the right to violate our Seventh Amendment rights by passing immunity for gun manufacturers and gun sellers to civil suits. If you support the Second Amendment, you should support the Seventh Amendment, which gives an individual a right to go to court if they believe they have a claim and have it heard by a jury of their peers. And I would like to hear Mr. Reed's comment on this, although I anticipate that he has already gotten his NRA talking points, and this one would not be among them.
Please hold your applause. 30-second rebuttal.
You know, Tracy, I think your position tonight, again, shows the flip-flop that is occurring through your campaign. Right on your website, before the primary, you said you supported a national registration and essentially a licensing system for all gun owners. That was on your website. I have a copy of it here in black and white. And then you changed it after the primary. I've stood firm in hostile environments about my belief and stance in support of the Second Amendment. But it does not mean, ladies and gentlemen, I don't care about the victims. We need to go after the criminals and those behind the gun.
Thank you, Congressman. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. 18 News Corning Bureau Chief Nikita Ramos is going to highlight Corning Community College for you at home. And don't forget to head to our website, mytwintiers.com.
I'm Corning Bureau Chief Nikita Ramos, and we'd like to thank SUNY Corning Community College for hosting tonight's 23rd District Congressional Debate. 18 News is your local news leader right here in the Twin Tiers.
SUNY Corning Community College is a great place to start. Students will find that here at Corning Community College, we are dedicated to their success, that we can assure them of academic excellence, and we're very proud of our connections to the community.
Corning Community College has really provided me with a lot of opportunities to pursue something that I enjoy, but also the opportunity to affordably find out what I enjoy.
8 out of 10 students who achieve an associate's degree at Corning Community College either stay in the area or return to the area. And in 2015, the Brookings Institute ranked Corning Community College in the top 20 in the nation for return on investment. That is, the investment students make in tuition and fees here pays off over the course of their career.
I fell in love with writing, and I fell in love with talking to people, which I'm now pursuing a degree in communications and journalism.
But at the heart of what we do is our academic excellence. The faculty and the staff here not only will support students in their academic goals, but they will challenge them, and it is that balance that prepares them for both transfer and the workforce.
It's awesome, fun, exciting, great.
Rest assured that when you choose Corning Community College, you will find that as part of the State University of New York, we have the network you need, we will challenge you, but we will support you to achieve your goals, and we welcome you. Please find your way to SUNY Corning Community College.
Welcome back, everyone. We're glad you're joining us this Tuesday evening. We are live from Corning Community College for the second half of the 23rd Congressional Debate between Congressman Tom Reed and Tracy Matrano. A reminder, we are streaming this debate live on our website, mytwintiers.com, where you can also vote in a poll. So we're going to return now to questioning. And the question now, Tracy. Tracy, I'm asking the question, and the question is this. President Donald Trump's son, Eric, was in Oneida County last week attending a rally for the Republican Congresswoman Claudia Tenney when he was asked by one of our reporters, quote, "How do you unite this country?" Eric's response was, quote, "I think the country is united." His, speaking about his father, approval ratings are the best they've ever been. Things are getting done. Do you agree or disagree? Is our country more united today?
Well, I don't think it's as united as we would all very much like for it to be. Certainly it feels as I have gotten older that this country has become more fractured. And most definitely, in the last cycle of our presidential administration, I have experienced a disheartening of the political discourse in our country, the ability for people to genuinely listen to each other, come to some understanding of what the other one is saying, instead of always giving a mischaracterization or hyperventilated understanding only to create the excitement. I believe that when Mr. Trump came forward, he was exciting and he was disruptive, and I understand his appeal to many people, but I'm afraid that his disruptions have fallen out in a way that does not serve this district. The tariffs are hurting our farmers, they're hurting our manufacturers, they are hurting our retailers. He supported separating children and parents at the border. He supported a tax bill that most decidedly is disadvantageous for working and middle-class people and has given a great windfall to the 1% while handing us a $2 trillion deficit. He, along with the Republicans, including Mr. Reed, have vowed to undermine Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid we paid into, and yet they think it's going to pay the debt that they created in order to hand off that 1%. Most importantly, Mr. Trump has not offered the moral leadership we need in this country. And that is my answer to your question. He is not doing what he could do to help us in this divisive moment. And it would be great if Mr. Reed could stand up and say that.
Please. Mr. Reed.
Our country is divided now, Zach, and it's a shame because our country right now is experiencing one of the greatest job growth and economic expansions we've seen in decades. And we should be celebrating our successes that North Korea is not arming itself with a nuclear weapon. And what we are talking about in regards to opportunities in manufacturing across our country. I appreciate that, Zach. But the divisiveness that I try to fight is how we do this job. I've held over 250 town halls. This last cycle, I have seen things at those town halls that are just atrocious. I had a 4-year-old on the shoulders of her father, where her father was encouraging that 4-year-old, not 10 feet away from me, to call me names that with words I don't even use. And I went up to that father, I said, why? It's the only time I confront it because I respect people raising their children and let them do it. But I said, why are you doing that? That's wrong. And he says, I will do it because I believe in encouraging his daughter to engage in that. And what I also try to do, not only with the town halls, go into groups that are adamantly opposed to me, I try to go to the next generation. You know, a couple weeks ago, I was at Ithaca High School, where we had a meeting with about 200 kids, 16, 17, and 18-year-olds. And there were a lot of folks in that room that disagreed with me. But what I appreciated about that is we had an honest conversation. We talked about legalizing weed. We talked about my pro-life position and their opposition to it. And what I encouraged them to do is, you know what? Don't throw bombs at each other with your words. Try to understand where the other side is coming from. And that's where our Problem Solver Caucus, the 48 of us, Democrats and Republicans that get together and is the only bipartisan group in Washington, D.C. recognized for the work it's doing. What we're trying to do is solve America's problems by coming together. And I'll continue to do my part in Washington, D.C.
Tracy, 30-second response.
Let's be very specific about the lack of moral leadership that we have had from this president. He has made fun of disabled people, women, immigrants, about whom he's spoken in racist and degrading terms. He has created moral equivalencies with neo-Nazis, and I think we have some examples of where for people who are vulnerable to that kind of thing for their own personal reasons can be influenced.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. This is for Tom. This is for you. This is Sean.
Well, sticking with the Trump theme, some people find our current president to be kind of divisive and may or may not bring new people out to the polls. In your travels throughout the 23rd District, how are you finding the reaction to people to our president?
You know, obviously, many of us, and I've expressed concern about sometimes the rhetoric and the tweet and the new form of communication, but I choose not to do that on the floor of the House or by going on TV and attacking the president. I choose to use our relationship with the president to express my disagreement on that style at times. But what I hear from people is he's brought a disruptive force to Washington, D.C., and they appreciate the fact, and that's why I think he got elected, because he listened to that silent voice in America that was forgotten. And what he's doing is growing the economy, getting people back to work. Because when America is the strongest is when people are working. I know people. I care about people. And what they want to do is be able to take care of themselves and their families by earning a paycheck. It's not just about what goes into your checkbook. It's about that dignity of work. It's about that pride that you get from work. And this president is delivering on that. And also, let's be very clear. We are now, under the energy policy that we've adopted over the last 2 years under the administration's leadership, we are the world's largest exporter of oil. I will tell you that changes many things. We are no longer dependent on extremists and radicalism and what we would know as the Middle East because of this policy. And what I try to do is make sure that people know how I feel, how I conduct myself in those town halls, how we answer the hard questions and tell you where we stand on the issues. And you don't see me going on TV. You don't see me on the floor of the House calling names and calling out the other side. What we do is try to lead by example. And when my Members of my party did not do these town halls. I said, I disagree with you. To represent people, you have to listen to people, and even those people that may be adamantly in opposition to you.
Tracy, 2-minute response.
I have among friends who have come here this evening Mr. Anthony Marco. He's a farmer over in Jasper. And when I met him during the primary season, he shared with me that he voted for Mr. Trump and he voted for Mr. Reed. But now he knows those people don't care about him anymore, and he's sitting in the front row with my family and friends here today. That's an example of some of the reactions that I have had from people all over this district who are concerned about their Social Security and Medicare, farmers who say they don't want a handout, they just want to be able to trade fairly, whether it's soybeans or corn or grapes. I think that if you want to look into history, where you can find what presidents in the past have done to address very divisive moments, we could look to President Jefferson, who after the contentious election of 1800 said, we are all Democrats, we are all Republicans. Or you can look to Abraham Lincoln, who in the greatest crisis of the Civil War ended his second inaugural address before he knew the war was going to be over by saying, with malice towards none and charity for all. Or to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who united a country in its economic paralysis of the Great Depression by saying we only have fear to fear itself. We can do better. We must do better. And I believe that this United States will do better. That is principally why I am running for this office. But we can only do it if we decide to have malice towards none and charity for all, and honestly work together to get what working and middle-class people need.
30 seconds. District. Thank you. 30 seconds. Please hold your applause. Please hold your applause. 30 seconds, Congressman.
You know, I know Mr. Marco, and I feel for you, Mr. Marco, losing your farm. I really do. And one of the things that I think the President is doing is he stood up on our trade policy that was neglected for too long. He is disrupting our trade policy by saying, we're not going to put American interests second when we negotiate these deals. We got a new deal with Canada and Mexico now because of what President Trump did. And what is that doing for our farmers? For the first time, we now have access with Class 7 milk for our farmers in Canada.
Thank you. A question now for Tracy. Brooke.
What do you foresee as your role in the House if you are elected, but the Republicans do retain a majority?
Well, I plan to work with anyone who wants to work with me to help the people of the 23rd District. I was in Sean's office earlier today, and he asked me a question, Mr. Vargo here, one of the speakers. And he said, if it were a Republican-led bill that would help the 23rd District, would you work for it? And I almost didn't even let him finish the sentence. Of course I would. I don't even understand why not. And if it's because of a belief of some characterization of me, then let's expel that characterization right now. I think of myself as a centrist or a moderate progressive, I suppose. That's what Mayor Bolin has used to describe me. But more importantly, I care about the people in this district, and I would work on any bill that is going to help them.
Your response, Congressman, 2 minutes.
Well, you know, obviously, my hope is we do retain the Republican majority in the House, and I will use my position in the Problem Solvers Caucus, chairing those 24 members on each side of the aisle with Josh Gottheimer, to be that voice of getting things done for the American people back home. And what I have demonstrated many times over and over again is a willingness to go across the aisle and support legislation that we can find common ground on. That is the right way to be a representative, in my humble opinion, in Washington, D.C., and that's what we've done. And we're going to continue to use the opportunities to first and foremost make sure that the interests of the district are put first in our calculations. Now, I have a philosophy. I am a proud Republican, a proud believer in people versus government running our lives. And that's a contrast between my opponent and myself, and often what you see in the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. I believe in individual accountability and responsibility. I believe in the work ethic of America. I believe in making sure that government limits itself to the role that the Constitution envisioned, where it keeps us safe from the bad guys, both foreign and domestic. What I believe in is making sure that government's role is to make sure that those who violate the rules and manipulate people are held accountable, and they pay the price by going to jail and being held accountable for justice. That is a philosophical difference. So when it comes to legislation, if it's in opposition to that type of philosophy, as I've demonstrated to you and stood before you in these town halls, I will stand firm on that principle and that philosophy. But it doesn't mean we can't find common ground. It doesn't mean that we can't find ground on health care when it comes to the individual marketplace and coming up with solutions in regards to stabilizing it. It doesn't mean we can't find common ground on immigration to fix our border and recognize that kids that came here at no fault of them have an opportunity to enjoy the American dream.
30 seconds, Tracy.
I'm not sure I understand what Mr. Reed's alleged philosophy is, so I'm just going to go to a simple fact. His Problem Solvers Group has solved this many problems in Congress.
Please hold your applause.
I believe in a limited government role. Government has a responsibility to be sure it has healthy people, educated people, and to lay an infrastructure down so that we can get people enjoying the prosperity we have been left behind after 8 years of representation without it.
Thank you. Please hold your applause. This is a debate, not a rally. Final, a question now for you, Tom.
Thank you, Zach.
What is the biggest threat right now to our nation?
You know, the biggest threat is, one, this divide. I'm very concerned that if any type of catastrophe hits our country, that if this division is not healed, that we will face these catastrophes that have come down in the history of time. You know, when you look at things like World War I, World War II, you look at the Great Depression, you look at the Civil War, what happened to America is at some point in time we came together to stand firm as American. I think it was best represented, Zach, after 9/11. There was some divide in America during that period of time. But when we were attacked, we united as Americans. So I think this division is something that we got to make sure we heal. And then I will also tell you, one of the things I disagreed with my party on recently, when we passed tax reform and we got this economy growing again, I think our party committed the mistake that Ronald Reagan made. When he got the economy growing again, they went on a spending spree. I voted against our budget deal because the national debt crisis, and stood up to our party leaders, and I stood up from a call from the White House to ask me to support that budget deal. And I said, no, we have to get our fiscal house in order. We need to get this national debt under control because that debt crisis is going off. And if it goes off and we are not united as Americans to solve this, I'm sorry, but we are potentially in very much trouble. So if this debt crisis goes off with any type of normalization of interest rates, you're starting to see it, Zach, where we see this economic growth and the Federal Reserve is in a box. They're talking about raising interest rates, but as you raise interest rates, remember that debt requires that you pay interest on that debt. If it gets up to 7-8%, we are going to have to find just interest payments alone that equal every dollar we spend on our national security to keep us safe as Americans. That type of debt load has to be wrestled in, and I'm leading the charge in Washington, D.C. to get that done.
Thank you. Tracy, 2 minutes.
I think the greatest threat that we have to this democracy is cybersecurity. It's one of the principal reasons why I left a good job in order to run for this race. I am seriously concerned about it. I've worked in this area now for 15 years. I have watched how cybersecurity has been ramping up, and specifically what are called nation-state attacks. So we're not just talking about random vandals, and we're not talking about organized crime or Nigerian scams or anything like that. We are talking about countries attacking other countries without any global internet international governance. There are no rules in the road. And instead, we have an administration that has published a cybersecurity strategy that's making it clear it's going to accelerate offensive nation-state cybersecurity actions. I find that to be irresponsible. It is time for the United States to stand up and be the leader it was in developing the Internet, and it used to be first in the world with network. Now it is 63, and we are playing a game that is far too perilous for us to risk. No one believes the next attack on the United States is going to come with a flotilla of ships on either of our coasts. It's going to come from cyber. And the best way to address it is not technology, because technology alone won't do it. We need to have rules, international rules, and we need the leadership in this country to begin to set the stage with other countries and stakeholders around the world in order to establish them, not unlike what we did after the Second World War in terms of our diplomacy. We took the lead, we had the lead, but we did it right.
Tom, 30 seconds.
I agree with Tracy. Cybersecurity is a threat, but I will also remind you the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats that I see, is having a nuclearized weapon in the hands of a North Korean dictator who could launch that missile and land it in our California coast. When I see the nuclearization efforts of Iran and I get briefed on what is going on across the world with terrorist states trying to get their hands on a nuclear weapon, that to me is a serious threat also. And I will never forget the lessons of 9/11 where those folks came on our shores.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the candidates will now be given an opportunity to ask each other a question. Now, the question is to be no longer than 30 seconds, and the question candidate will have 1:30 to answer, and the questioning candidate will be given 30 seconds to rebut. So, Tom, we're going to ask you to go first since you won the coin toss, and you will ask Tracy a question.
Tracy, on the Second Amendment in the primary, you said you supported a national registration and essentially a licensing system for gun owners. We have a copy of your website explicitly stating this before you removed it after the primary. On fracking, you said you have been against it your entire life, and yet in today's Jamestown Post newspaper, you're quoted as supporting fracking. You say in your TV ads you will not take corporate PAC money, yet your largest donor is Andrew Cuomo's PAC. On the Finger Lakes incinerator, you've flipped on that issue. Given this dishonesty, how can voters trust anything you said here tonight?
Wow.
And Tracy.
I did change my position on the Second Amendment. Who would disagree with me in this room that this is not a very serious issue for this country to face? I learned a great deal throughout that primary, and I thought for myself, I didn't take my talking points from the NRA. I did my own research. And at the end of the day, I decided that what I had been proposing throughout the time of the primary would not work. But when I learned about that immunity that gun manufacturers and sellers have to civil suits, I knew I had what it's going to take to help people keep their Second Amendment rights and respect our Seventh Amendment rights. I have always been against fracking. The largest donor I am aware of is Kirsten Gillibrand's, and it was $5,000. Mr. Cuomo's office sends them out to everybody. It was just a standard send. I can't even remember the other thing that you said, but let me say this in the 30 seconds remaining. Mr. Reed, I think there are a lot of people in your district who would like you to, whatever you called it, flip-flop, but more accurately, think for yourself and decide what's really going to be best for the people of your district. And don't take your talking points from the next big corporate PAC that doesn't give you $2,700, which I got from Mr. Cuomo, but hundreds of thousands of dollars, which you get.
Please. 30 seconds.
I have stood firm on my position, Zach. I've stood before the district and worked this 11 counties each and every day. I have stayed firm on my positions because I believe in them and I listen to that voice. And we've learned from folks across this district what are the priorities of the people we represent. The town halls and being accessible, the 13,000 cases that we've done, handling in the office, I'm proud of. We're going to always be open. We're always going to be accessible to you. And I'm just Tom, and I always will be.
All right. Thank you. Tracy, you have an opportunity to ask Tom a question.
Thank you, Zach. Mr. Reed, how can you claim the mantle of no labels when you label all of your opponents, anyone who disagrees with you, and a whole portion of this district in fear-mongering terms? Just a few days ago, in an email you sent out to supporters, and I quote, "Fringe leftists, San Francisco Democrat extremists, and the liberal machine." My supporters are students here in Steuben, farmers in Chautauqua, and teachers around Tompkins.
Well, Tracy, I guess the reason we are doing this is to highlight that extremism we will fight day in and day out. When you talk about extreme ideas such as open heroin injection sites that you support, government-run health care, $32 trillion that are going to double our taxes, and in your own words, raise our taxes 20 and 25%. When you talk about manufacturing jobs being something of the 18th and 19th century, that is something that is extreme. That is something I will fight day in and day out. I'm proud of our record. I'm proud of trying to identify where that extremism is. But I'm not attacking people. I'm attacking an ideology. I'm attacking an ideology, and you may laugh, you may scoff, and I get that, and I understand that. But because you disagree with me, that's okay. I know who I am. I've grown up here. I live in a house my grandfather built. I'm going to die here in this area because this is home, and I will continue to fight extremism. I'm going to continue to fight for the American way of life, which is about having a hard-working job, keeping people safe, using government for its lawful purpose, and that is to make sure that the government doesn't become too big to overtake your life and make such things as fundamental decisions of health care for your future. We're going to empower you as patients and empower doctors.
30 seconds, Tracy, for response. 30 seconds.
I'm sorry. I don't feel like you're answering the question. I don't feel like you're speaking to me, Mr. Reed, and I don't know how you can hold yourself out for being for bipartisanship when in Jamestown and here, I try to share with you what my position is, and then you make up some other position for me and attack it. That's called a straw man argument, and it almost seems as if that is the psychology you live in.
All right. Thank you both. All right. We're going to move now to closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute in length. Tracy, you'll go first, followed by Tom.
Well, I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity, and the experience of campaigning has been the greatest experience of my life, except for having my boys. And I thank you all for it, because I have really come to love and embrace the people of Western New York, Finger Lakes, and Southern Tier. And I very earnestly ask for your vote, because I want to go to Washington to get what you have told me that you want: affordable health care, good education without debt, good infrastructure, responsible management of our natural resources, and a tax plan that makes sense for working and middle-class people around this country and around this district. And finally, I want to say, most importantly, what you want and you deserve is dignity and respect as an individual, no matter who you are, where you live, how much money you make, together with the support of our fellow citizens to live, fight for, and love this country, the United States. With them too, all of us. All of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Congressman Reed.
Well, I thank you, Tracy, for running. I thank you for engaging in this debate tonight. But, ladies and gentlemen, this choice is clear. You know, my position is something I've stood before you and held firm on and will continue to do. Tracy, I wouldn't have to have this conversation with you if you didn't flip-flop back and forth on issues between the beginning of the campaign to the end. But I'm sick and tired of it. We are going to stand up to extremism. We are going to stand up in hostile crowds, and we're going to fight for you, because my opponent wants to empower more government. My opponent believes in the philosophy that government is the one to solve your problems. You know what I believe in? I believe in you. I believe in you having the power to control your own destiny. I believe in you having the power to seize the opportunities and let you succeed or fail on your own merits. And I understand the pain and the hardship you're going through. But I will tell you, we have great opportunity ahead of us because our economy is growing. Jobs are at their highest level in the nation's history. And I will tell you, we can continue this fight. Support us as we go forward.
Tom. Tom and Tracy, thank you so much. That will do it for this live televised debate from Corning Community College. You can head to our website, mytwintiers.com. For more on this debate along, there will also find a link to our media partners and leaders.
Yes, and a reminder that 18 News WETM is your local election headquarters. We'll have that next Tuesday, November 6th.